I'm a child of the 80s, proudly established 1982. For me, nothing screams video games like a good side-scrolling beat-em-up. I remember being 7 or 8 and taking a little plastic stick with me to the arcade to watch the bigger boys be better at Double Dragon than I'd ever be. Golden Axe, Altered Beast, untold others, well received by critics. And then in 1991, we saw the release of one of the most iconic games of the genre, Sega's Streets of Rage. Now, before we go any further, we're well aware over here that Streets of Rage owes a lot, and we mean a lot, to Capcom's arcade classic Final Fight. But that doesn't take anything away from it. The game begins with its iconic scrolling titles to set the scene. And to summarise, 3 cops have taken it upon themselves to rid the city of the crime and corruption that plagues what was once a happy and peaceful place, by whatever means necessary. Especially if that means a bazooka, because why wouldn't you if you could? So far, so beautifully 80s. If it were a movie, Eric Roberts would be the villain and the soundtrack would have so many clenched fists, its palms would start bleeding. Our characters? Adam Hunter, former pro boxer, Axel Stone, karate expert, and Blaze Fielding, judo practitioner, alongside a few good cops left who they call in for backup. They go out on their mission to clean up the streets and remove crime kingpin Mr. X once and for all. That's right, the boss's name is Mr. X. I love it. I just love it. The game takes us through 8 stages, venturing through the bar-lined avenues of the city, through the darker inner city streets, across the beach, over the somewhat in construction bridge, aboard a ship, through a warehouse, up a freight elevator, and finally into the penthouse suite that the criminal syndicate calls their headquarters, and ultimately houses the notorious Mr. X himself. The gameplay is simple, solid, and never anything less than enjoyable. Whilst all the characters feel mostly the same, they have slight variations in their attacks. And you notice Adam is the slowest of the 3, whilst Axel has the least jumping ability, and Blaze is the least powerful with regards to her attacks. Each stage feels different to the other, and I remember thinking, even when I was a kid, how cool it was that we got to fight on a beach. Most of these sort of games lean on drab urban settings. This one gave you a scenic view. Some even featured interactive elements. You could throw enemies into bins and telephone boxes, through gaps in bridges, lure them into warehouse machinery and watch them get crushed. Throw them off a freight elevator, plummet into their death far below. Enemies were simple but varied, and boy are they plentiful. Coming at you from all sides, sometimes with weapons. With differing amount of life, meaning you had to employ a modicum of strategy. And then there's the end of level bosses. 3 words: super hard. They start off simple enough, but the further in you get, the tougher they become. Giant, hulking men, pro wrestlers who breathe fire, insert Ricky Steamboat reference here. Some with massive claws, giving it their best Freddy Krueger. But the toughest? The 2 girls who look just like Blaze. You can't grab them. They jump and flip and fly everywhere. And their flying kick attack is possibly the scariest thing in the game. I'm not sure I've ever avoided it intentionally. And okay, alright, we've waited long enough, the soundtrack. Despite the fact that the graphics for 1991 were great, despite the fact it was super immersive and immensely playable, this game is usually remembered for one thing above all else: that soundtrack. The music for this game was composed by Yuzo Koshiro, a man once described by Nintendo Power magazine as arguably the greatest game music composer of the 16-bit age, and was truly groundbreaking, blending house and techno with R&B and hip-hop influences to give players a soundtrack that they'd never experienced before in a video game. The Mega Drive sound chip was notoriously limited. It took a genius to get something good out of it, let alone great. Yuzo Koshiro got something great out of it. I must have played this game hundreds of times. Sometimes revisiting games you loved as a kid and looking at them through adult eyes shows you nothing but their faults. Rose-tinted specs are a real thing. That doesn't happen with Streets of Rage. It's as addictive as it ever was in 1991. Some modern gamers give it a lot of flack for its similarities to Final Fight, a game they feel should be held in much higher esteem. I'm not one of those people. It took a well-worn formula and, if not perfected it, then honed it so it deserved to be spoken of in the same breath as titans of the genre. It was easily accessible, sounded great, played impeccably, but most importantly, it was fun. Big, dumb, fire-breathing, back-flipping, suplexing, machinery-abusing, berry riding, pipe-wielding, knife-throwing, apple-eating, elevator-riding, bazooka-firing fun. Was Modern Warfare the greatest single-player FPS campaign of all time? Click the video on screen for more awesome Fat Ninja Gaming content.